Well, JT the Brick joining me now, a Raiders talk show host and someone who's been covering this team for 27 years now. And JT, this is not a day that any Raider fans hope for because now the Raiders are going to have four head coaches in 5 seasons. What was your instant reaction to seeing that Antonio Pierce would no longer be the head coach?
Well, I feel for him, and he's a good man. And I had a chance to interview him every week on the coaches show, and he gave everything he had to this organization. He was a Raider fan. As a kid, he took over as the interim coach, did a really good job, earned the spot as head coach. And then unfortunately for him, it didn't work out this year. There were so many injuries. The team was decimated with injuries. The quarterback play was spotty at best. Both quarterbacks got injured. And they had a difficult time losing 10 games in a row. But I can tell you from knowing Coach Pierce, he'll do well in life because he worked so hard for this opportunity to get a chance. He loved the Raiders. He gave it everything he had. And unfortunate, the organization's going in a different direction because you got to win now. It's very important that they get this hire right. And there's a lot of candidates out there that are going to be hired by other teams if the Raiders don't pounce first. So a lot's going on now.
Well, many would argue that Antonio Pierce was never dealt a good hand with this situation. You look at the quarterback room and how that went. And despite no matter how bad the losing streak got, he never really lost that locker room. The players still voiced their support for AP all the way. So why do you think this decision was made? Whereas going into last offseason, he had those players' support and he got the job. What made it different this time around where the Raiders decided it's time to move on?
It's about the record. They lost 10 in a row. They had a losing record. This was a really bad year for the Raiders historically in any generation to lose this many games. So if you don't win, and there's been other coaches here, all the coaches who have been here in Las Vegas all had the same goal to win and to try to get to the playoffs and get it done. And Mark Davis is trying to find the right combination. One of the many things about Mark is he wants to win. And if he sees something and he believes he can fix it, he's going to go do that. And now with the support of Tom Brady and what his decision will be in a consulting role, Tom Brady's an owner. Okay, this isn't a guy coming in who's a broadcaster slash friend. He's an owner of this team now. So I'm sure he's going to have a lot to say. But when you talk about Coach Pierce this year, you're right. It was stacked against him. The injuries. I've been around this team a long time, going on my fourth decade, and I haven't seen a team this badly injured like the Raiders along the way. And Coach Pierce made some good decisions and some tough decisions in game. But the fact that the team just couldn't win at a consistent pace hurts every coach in this league. Look, there's 6 coaching vacancies as we're speaking. And there's a lot of good men that got fired over the last 2 to 3 to 4 days. And they did the same thing. They tried to win. They tried to coach. They tried to do their best, but it's a results-based business.
So after the AP experience going one and done, do you think that this front office, this ownership, now with Tom Brady on board too, what do you think they maybe have learned from this past season and what they're looking for in their next coach, if anything?
Well, that's a good question. They're all looking for the same thing, continuity. They want to see better football being played, discipline-wise, penalties cut down. And Coach Pierce was pretty good at that. But this team has to define what they're going to do, the Raiders with a quarterback. And I think the priority after getting a head coach, because Tom Telesco will be here as the GM, is to find a head coach that can take what Antonio Pierce did great, keep that locker room flying. Have that locker room really believing, and all players do. Coaches come and coaches go, and the players get paid to play. And they're playing for the famed Raiders, who have been one of the great franchises in North American sports history. So they're going to try again to get in there and get the proper coach that could find the right quarterback, and Aiden O'Connell will be in that discussion. So it could be a rookie high draft pick. The Raiders have the 6th pick overall, or they can go get a veteran quarterback who's highly proven. And then this is the most important offseason that I've seen since the Raiders came to Vegas. They're all important, but this one's got a little bit of everything going. You got to get a quarterback. You got a high draft pick. You got to get a coach. You got to build a new coaching staff. Everything has to be great. And I expect the Raiders are going to try to thread the needle and come on in here and do several things really well so they can compete again in the AFC West and take a shot at the playoffs.
Well, JT, a glass half full approach to the Antonio Pierce situation with this season, no matter how bad the record was that Dan Campbell went 3-13-1 in his first season in Detroit, and now the Lions are one of the best teams in the NFL, maybe number one. So, what do you think about this situation where, when you look at that situation, how AP had the locker room driven, just like Dan Campbell did? They were both emotional head coaches that led in that manner. Do you think that maybe AP just didn't show enough, or was it a lack of patience by the front office and they needed a fix now? How do you think those situations would maybe differ?
It's just ownership. Detroit wanted to give Dan Campbell a little bit longer, and the Raiders want to move on. That's it. There's a new regime here with the Raiders, with the addition of Tom Brady and others, a new ownership group involved with some minority owners. And this all comes down to Mark Davis. If Mark Davis feels like he can do something that will make the team better, he's going to pull the trigger. A lot of thought went into this. Everybody cares about Antonio Pierce. He's definitely a Raider. He'll be welcome back as long as he comes back. And it's really unfortunate it didn't work, because at the time, and being on the front lines of the Raiders, the fans wanted him. And he earned that job to be the head coach from the interim coach. But this was one of those years, Nick, when it happens, every once in a while you hit a season like this where everything goes wrong. And it's usually because of injuries, personnel, and players not being available. And unfortunately, that's why Antonio Pierce is not here. It's not his fault or all his fault. A lot of things went against him. And that's why we wish him well, because he has the passion to be a great coach in this league going forward.
Well, you have a great sense of this team, the direction of it. You're around the team all the time. You said yourself that you would talk with Antonio Pierce all the time in person on your show. And I'm sure you've spoken with Max Crosby plenty of times. You know him very well. Of course, he missed the latter portion of the season with that injury that placed him on IR. And Max Crosby was one of those players that was very vocal, wanting Antonio Pierce to be the head coach of this team. Now, we don't know if maybe where his mind would be at with this situation. But do you have any kind of insight into maybe where Max would be in this situation, if he would disagree with this, or if he would be on board with whatever Mark Davis saw was best for the vision of the team?
Yeah, I stay in my lane in regards to talking for players, because Max has a podcast and he has a lot of platforms and he's going to speak on it. As a matter of fact, he just spoke about this before Antonio Pierce was let go on his podcast on Sirius XM. And all Max wants to do is win. It's been hard on Max. He's the best player on the team. He comes in there and he wants to lead, and he continues to lead. And I can tell you this about Max Crosby: he will be the first player at the front entrance when the new coach is announced. He'll be there at the press conference, I would suspect. And Max is going to be the leader when he recovers, because Max Crosby is the cornerstone player of this franchise on defense. And as you know, Brock Bowers had a brilliant year, right? Breaking all these records as a rookie tight end. And there's some really good players on this roster. What I will tell you going forward is there's a lot of opportunity here. This isn't like your typical team that has the sixth pick overall in the first round. They're much better than that. A lot of the players who are hurt are coming back, like Christian Wilkins. You're going to see players that are stars in this league coming back. They got Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer, Trey Tucker, and Robert Spillane. Hopefully he's coming back with Max Crosby. This is not a rebuild. This is an opportunity to nail the draft, spend a lot of money in free agency, bring the players back who deserve to come back, because as you know, you're around the team a lot. A lot of these players will not be back. And for the Raiders to hit the ground running before April, free agency April, to put a better product on the field at Allegiant Stadium next season.
Awesome. Well, last one for you, JT. Now we look to the future. Who might be that head coach? You look at several of these candidates that are out there who are already taking interviews, like Ben Johnson, OC of the Detroit Lions, Mike Vrabel, former head coach of the Tennessee Titans, who has that former teammate connection with Tom Brady, now co-owner of the Raiders. Do you have a few names that's in your mind where, if you could just look into a crystal ball, you think maybe has the best chance to land this job?
Yeah, that's a fair question. That's what I'll be doing on my talk shows and on Raider Nation Radio. Got to figure out who the coach is going to be. Tom Brady has a deep connection to Mike Vrabel. Everybody thinks Mike Vrabel's probably the most established coach who's available, but you would think the Patriots want him, the Chicago Bears, the interview process there. So Mike Vrabel's one of the obvious names. I like Pete Carroll. I'm a big fan of Pete Carroll as a veteran guy who can come in, who's won a Super Bowl. Ben Johnson, as you said, he's the best available young candidate who's never been a head coach. What it's going to come down to is, what do the Raiders want? An established coach who's been there before. Mike McCarthy's name's out there, not so much for the Raiders, but he's going to interview if he can with the Bears. So you're going to have that tier of the guys who have won already. John Gruden, let's not forget Coach Gruden's name and the success he's already had in this market. Or it could just be a young guy that is a young coordinator. If the Raiders get the right quarterback, those two can grow for years to come. But it's going to have to happen pretty quickly here, because the cream of the crop, the top names you're talking about, they're all getting interviewed while we speak. And the Raiders are going to jump right back into this and try to figure out who's the best candidate. And reports are Tom Brady's going to be involved in that process there. And it's going to be great to see his eyes on this product too.
Well, JT the Brick always has his finger on the pulse of this team and does a fantastic job with his show. We really appreciate your time, okay?
Thank you. Thanks, Bud.